To our audience, I apologize for any imperfections in our recordings because of COVID-19. We are now recording remotely rather than in our studio. Bear with us. We hope that you are safe and that your families are all safe. It was our intent on focusing on the impact of the COVID-19 on the Black community, but this rash of Black murders redirected our attention to cover those and address police reform. We will, however, continue to follow COVID-19, and as soon as we can get back to the impact on the Black community and get beyond police reform and all of these murders, we will get back to that coverage.
This episode may contain sensitive language not suitable for children.
Through Black Eyes Unfiltered, Season 3, the design of a 21st century police department as viewed through Black Eyes Unfiltered. Welcome back to Through Black Eyes Unfiltered. Our most recent episodes have been focused on outcries across this country and around the world expressing dismay at the police killing of Blacks. But for this episode, we turn our attention to one of the most challenging decisions this country has faced in the past 50 years, the reform of our police department. Our program experts and our guests will tackle some of the difficulties cities and police departments face as some of them try to hold on to systemic racism forms of policing and others move forward towards designing a more just and inclusive police organization. I'm Dr. Raymond Dunn, professor, college dean, community activist, author, and commentator for this podcast, here to address this issue as flawed historian, author, higher education administrator, psychologist, community activist, Through Black Eyes Unfiltered expert, and my brother, Dr. Marvin Dunn. Our guest today will be retired former Miami-Dade County Sheriff's Department and veteran community organizer, Mr. Lonnie Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence is board chairman of the Miami Coalition of a Safe and Drug-Free Community and chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Miami-Dade Police Department. Okay. Is it necessary to defund police departments as a step in the restructuring process?
No, I think the problem is that what's the definition of defunding?
Right.
If you talk about reallocating or redirecting funds, that's one thing. But to defund, in my estimation, means taking the money completely away.
Okay.
And that means you have no operation. So I don't think you have to defund. I think you can look at programs and begin to put in programs that would lessen the police response, but increase the response of professionals in other areas such as domestic, such as mental health, and those kinds of things. But to defund is not good as far as I'm concerned.
I think a person who says that the police should be defunded hasn't lived long enough. Those of us who've been around know we need the police. We need good policing. And I totally agree with Lonnie. We need to reform, not defund the police. As a matter of fact, that slogan itself is handing conservatives and Ku Kluxes and Trump supporters just the kind of message they want, that we're so radical that we want to defund the police. It's a stupid proposition. I don't know who advanced that. We need to reform, not defund.
Okay, to both of you, I know that you know of places where police officers are walk the streets and they are not armed. Should police officers be armed at all times, or should we look at some of the models like in Nassau and other places where the police officers, all of the police officers are not armed all of the time?
2 o'clock in the morning, somebody's dragging your child out of the house, and you wake up. Who are you going to call? A social worker? Somebody who doesn't have a gun? I think officers should be armed. There's danger out there. The community needs to be protected. It's how they use those weapons that is in question. If that officer is well-trained, is psychologically balanced, is familiar with the community, the weapon is not an issue. It's how and who uses the weapon in the inappropriate or appropriate way.
Well, I was the dean at Miami-Dade College. You started something called the Criminal Justice Institute. I know, Lonnie, you were a part of that. But one of the things as an outsider that impressed me was they oftentimes invited the college administrators to come over and see what they were doing. And one of the things that impressed me the most was this whole shoot, don't shoot scenario that they went through.
Right.
And I always felt that police officers were well trained in that. But then I look at this police officer who just shot this guy in the back and he's running away. If he did not have his gun, and Marvin, I hear you. But if he didn't have his gun, maybe two of them would have been more effective in trying to talk this guy down and doing something other than making him do what he did.
Let me say this. It goes back further than that. Maybe if they had dealt with the initial contact in a different way, there wouldn't have been, number one, the tussle, number two, the taking of the taser, and number three, the shooting of the person in the back.
Wait, Ron, help me understand. What did they do that was wrong? I watched that tape with them approaching the gentleman several times. I didn't see anything go wrong until the struggle started. Clarify that for me.
Let me clarify what I'm saying. The guy was sleeping in the car, and if I'm not mistaken, there was something said in the conversation about, can I get a ride home or something like that.
But they offered to give him a ride home, and he said, no, I'll walk. My sister lives just a couple blocks away.
And why didn't they let him walk? They couldn't let him drive away because that's liability. They faced liability if they let him go away. If he walked away, so be it. They had checked him for weapons and everything else.
And they had his car right there.
And they had his car.
Exactly. So they knew who he was. So
I'm just saying that that's the kind of decision making that I believe would have been different if he had not been a black male.
Lonnie, can community policing work in a large urban city like where you were? How could that work?
See, it did work. Listen, Ray, the fact of the matter is people make it seem like community policing is some kind of rocket science. Community policing is simply walking and talking, communicating with people, and getting out of the car instead of riding around with your windows up and not communicating. That's all community policing is.
Exactly.
That's all it is. It is no big found, we got to do this and we got to do that. And no.
It's part of the problem the fact that the officers are so dependent upon the police car as a refuge, as a place for safety.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that there's so much mobility that's required, so to speak. See, we have to back up and look at police normally going from call to call to call. So we've got to be able to get out of that, running from call to call to call, and get into a situation where some of the things that we might send somebody out on a call could be handled otherwise.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
That's what we got to get into, and give officers an opportunity to get out and do some community relating.
Ford was trying to pass a fake $20 bill. Why do you need a sworn officer to come up and take care of that? Why could there be an unarmed community patrol person who could
that's all they do, because the whole idea, it was a black man trying to pass, they thought was a phony $20 bill, okay? They wanted him arrested, not to just come up and take a report. Because that's generally what's speaking until you can verify that it is truly a counterfeit bill. They used to be, they just take a report, take the bill, send it to the FBI or whomever.
Plus cameras, and everybody comes into the counter. But soon pass the fake bill, you have the person on tape who gave you the bill. And it's this picture. So, I'm not sure that kind of an example would require a sworn officer to come in and take care of that. I agree with Marvin. We got to find other things that can be taken out that plate. Yeah.
Marvin, as a commissioned naval officer, I know that you cannot socialize to X extent with enlisted men. Now, you would know more why you guys have that separation than I would. But in community policing, does the police run the risk of being viewed as a buddy-buddy relationship when they start getting into the community, sitting in lounge chairs, talking with you, blah, 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 blah. You know, I mean,
I dream that such a thing can happen. You don't shoot your buddies.
At what point would people in the community lose that respect for that badge and that officer? Because, hey,
Ray, I can remember sitting under a tree with people, but they respected me because of how I treated them, and they knew that if something was wrong, that I was going to handle it.
Okay,
you do, and you have to establish yourself, and you do this, and that, and you know I'm going to have to take action. So don't cross that line now. We're going to be okay, but don't cross that line. That's where you would get into trouble, is crossing that line. And you don't sit and drink with them. No, you don't do that. Because then you've crossed the line.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, community policing doesn't involve having a drink with the guys on the court.
No. Mm-hmm. And if you carry yourself right, you get the kind of respect you need no matter what.
Right. Gentlemen, I know the difficulty in working with unions, and I know what unions are for. I know what they're supposed to. I know what a union is.
Okay. I came out of a union family.
Okay, but gentlemen, what changes need to be addressed within the police union in order to effectuate positive change?
Let me say this. I think that, first of all, police unions have to realize they represent all of the people, not some of the people. That's number one. Number two, unions have to understand and come to grips with the fact that people doing wrong make them look bad too. They shouldn't want people to do wrong and run out there to defend them. Mm-hmm. I think that's the one thing. The other thing is I think unions wield a lot of political power, and that's somehow or another that's foggy. That doesn't seem like it should be. But that's how they get what they want most of the time.
Well, that's why unions came into being as political instruments.
Exactly.
They were born of politics.
Right.
Exactly. But one of the problems that we face is when a bad police officer does something,
they're going to run and defend them.
Yeah, we're trying to get him fired, trying to get him charged. And what does the union do? The union steps in and
the union, but see that comes to what the governments have allowed unions to put into contracts and everything else.
That's why I'm asking the question: what changes need to be addressed within the police unions then?
Well, I mean, look, teachers unions do the same thing.
Of course,
try to get rid of a bad teacher. Here comes the union saying, so that's the union's role. But I think Lonnie just hit it. It depends on what goes into that union contract. Okay. Right. And the public officials who sign that contract sign away certain kinds of protections that the public has from bad actors inside that union.
Yeah. And the union should not want those bad apples, but they paying dues. So, and they got to make sure that they give the right impression about, I'm going to defend you no matter what.
Exactly. And that's what happens.
Yeah. That's exactly what happens.
Alana, this question is directed specifically to you. Should there be a hiring ratio of officers to community composition so that, hey, if 18% of your community is black, of your residents are black, then 18%, approximately 18% of your officers should be black? Should we go that way?
Exactly. And I'll take you back to the lawsuit that the Progressive Officers Club signed off with the county back in, I believe, 1972.
And those are the black officers, right?
The black officers, the black officers. And we sued the department for promotions, for hiring, for assignments, and everything. And part of that, they weren't big on not talking about quotas at that time. Mm-hmm. Part of it was what they call it, hiring. There's another word you use for it.
Same result.
Same result. Mm-hmm. And it was based on the population percentage. So, and we took it all the way up to include some of the ranking positions. A third. Okay. Is what we really started out with. Yes, I think that does. Now, having said that, we got to make sure that we have young people who are prepared to step up and step in. Mm-hmm. So we have to do things to make sure that they can't say, well, we can't find no qualified people.
It goes back to an earlier discussion we were having about race questions, about whether police officers should have a degree, a college degree, which I think would eliminate many excellent potential officers who could learn this job and do it well and not necessarily have a college degree. Having a degree once you're an officer should enhance your career as you move up the ladder because you've got more education, more training. But I think any requirement of a bachelor's would be too limiting to the potential.
Because too many of our young people don't go that route. And number two, why get a degree and go be a police officer when you can get a degree and do something that does not put you, in your mind, in harm's way?
Lonnie, you know my background is in teaching.
Yes, sir.
And I remember starting out as an elementary school teacher. We actually had an officer friend at our school. No, I'm serious. I'm going back a number of years on you. But is that program still in effect today? Is there an officer-friendly program? And if not, isn't that a part of what we are talking about in community policing?
Listen, back in the day, officer-friendly, I've had so many people that I run into every now and then and would say, I remember when there was an officer-friendly in my school, and I learned this, and that from officer-friendly. Well, you know, what happened is that policing, more often than not, got caught up in the community's response about we need more police on the street. We need more police on the street. So what happens is that a lot of those kind of programs end up getting cut out. Now, they have resource officers in some of the schools that are furnished not by the police departments, but by Miami-Dade School Police. But officer-friendly, hey, listen, there are a lot of people tell you that officer-friendly is the reason why they didn't go the other way in terms of getting into trouble.
And you know, Lonnie, what I'm talking about with my lawn chair police officers is officer-friendly is on the street, in the community, doing the same sort of thing.
Marvin, all of them should be officer-friendly. I understand that law enforcement is not an easy job, so to speak. It can be a little tougher than people think it is because you're dealing with so many different personalities. You're dealing with other people's problems while you sometimes dealing with your own problems. So it can be a difficult thing. And you might not be friendly today, but you know that if you go out there and you treat people right, you do what you're supposed to do, and if you have to take action, you do it in a professional manner.
Well, let me ask you this. How many times did you have to fire your service weapon on duty, if at all?
You ready for it?
Yeah.
0.
That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah.
Never.
And how long were you in the Department of Public Safety?
I was over at the police department for 20-some years. I mean, I was with the county for 30 years, but I was with the police department for 20-some years. Never fired it other than at the range.
Training.
Nope. Never had to fire it.
Okay, gentlemen. I'm sure I think I know where both of you are going to come from because you both believe in community policing, but should promotion criteria include such things as participating in community events, literally coaching, all those things that will actually put you in the community and have you helping out outside of the blue uniform, so to speak?
Well, I think that it should include community outreach, community involvement. I don't want to get specific because, I don't want to say, coaching, but it could be involved with a community and not necessarily outside of your uniform. Why are you in uniform? So I think it should be a part of it because people tend to look at productivity. If you will always hear the word, what's your productivity? What's an officer's productivity? And that's a way of saying, are you handling calls? Are you writing tickets? Are you doing those things that are quantifiable, so to speak? If you're doing your job right, the quantifiable results could be a significant drop in the number of crimes that are occurring in your area, the number of people who are being arrested from your area because they're not doing stuff that they would do if you were not doing what you do.
Okay, I came up with the term. I've never heard of this before. It's made up by me. An officer support program. What I'm trying to describe is something that is the opposite of the probation officer program. You're coming out of jail, out of prison, wherever you're coming from, you're a former inmate, and you've got to check in with your probation officer over a certain period of time. I've actually spoken to people, former inmates, who said to me that one of the reasons that they went back to prison is because when they got out, there was no support for them. They would think that there had been, other than this probation officer where I got to go to, that there had been another kind of program where I could have gone for advice from police or other law enforcement type people. I probably would not have gone back in. Can there be a program like that?
I'm not sure that really falls into what a police officer do, other than he can do that by community involvement, by someone knowing that, hey, I can stop Officer Joe and ask him about it. But if they feel like they can't approach you, then you can't provide them that help. Now, one other thing is that a lot of the problems is folk are snatched up off the street, put in jail, and a lot of the programs that you have in jail, some of them have been cut out because of budget cuts and budget redirections or what have you. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't do something to change the landscape from which that person came from, what is he going back to?
Right, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. Okay, then let me ask this of both of you. What do you think of the police reform legislation proposals coming out of the House of Representatives and the Senate? Will they actually reform policing in this country?
I think there are a couple of good things that they're talking about. The database certainly should have been long ago available. Sharing of information back and forth between departments, I think, is important. But I don't really know that I'm hearing anything that gets to the root of policing itself in terms of changing the way in which we do policing.
What about qualified immunity? That's one of the things that get the police officers off more than anything else.
That's one of the things that ought to be looked at, should be taken off the table. You know, if you get right down to it, if you get a police officer's word against a citizen's word, 9 times out of 10, the police officer's word is going to be taken, because that is the person out there in danger and whose job it is to try to figure out what's going on. So it's never going to be equal. The officer's word is going to be taken over a regular citizen's word. But that doesn't mean that these officers should be protected by unreasonable legal protections that are in place for them.
Right. I think it's how you use it. You know, a lot of problems that we have things in place, but we don't use them to the degree that we need to use them to make things happen. And that's one of them. We don't use it. I mean, it's sort of kicked around, and the same thing that they were talking about. I think the Senate bill incentivizes voluntary not using the chokehold. But that's too late. That's after the fact.
Yeah, the person's dead then. Yep. The deal's got a rule that the person's dead.
Okay, Lonnie and Marvin, in conclusion, going to be wrapping up here. What can we all agree on that, as viewed through Black eyes now, what will form the best foundation for a 21st century police department that will equally respect, protect, and serve all citizens regardless of race or color?
Great question. Communication.
There you go.
Communication.
I totally agree with you, Marvin. Communication, communication, communication. That's what's going to make it happen. And there's some very good things that were done with 21st century policing under President Obama, that commission. And I think it has to be communication. And the fact of the matter is we can't sit back and throw barbs at it. We got to be willing to sit down at the table and say, okay, these are the things that we can do. These are the things that the community can do to take the reins back from the few bad guys who are ruining it for everybody else. So,
okay. Now, gentlemen, let me just make a note to our audience. I apologize for our program change with our intent to focus this season on the impact of COVID-19 on the Black community. But the rest of Black murders, we directed our attention to cover them and to address police reform, as we have just discussed today. We will, however, continue to follow COVID-19, and as dealt with throughout our country and the world, we will get back to that. Marvin and Lonnie, exciting and informative discussion this has been. Gentlemen, thank you very much.